Well, hey everyone, this is Chris DiFurio with Keys to the Shop. Welcome to another edition of Shift Break. Today's episode is brought to you by La Marzocco, who's been making espresso machines by hand in Florence since 1927. La Marzocco is known the world over for its beauty, dependability, quality, and innovation. Innovation like the KB90 espresso machine using straight-in locking portafilter technology, which they invented to help with ergonomics. You've got the scale built into the drip tray, which helps the accuracy of your extractions, of course. And then also there's the auto flush feature in the group heads, which helps with workflow and keeping things clean. And this is just one example of many different types of espresso machines that La Marzocco has that are perfect for your coffee bar. Just reach out, info@lamarzocousa.com, and one of their salespeople will work with you to help you find the right machine for your cafe. I got to tell you, I always have loved working on La Marzocco's. It's a wonderful company, wonderful machines. Email them, info@lamarzocousa.com, and also check out their website, lamarzocousa.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Espressly. Espressly is dedicated to the small business owner, the coffee shop entrepreneur who wants to really craft something special for their audience, for their customers. And how they do that is through custom branded mobile apps. That's what Espressly is all about. And this is critical because you're not just another dot on a map with Espressly. When your customers want coffee, they open their phone, they've got your menu right there, they've got your logo, the colors, everything. It's that culture right in the palm of their hand. And it's a no-risk model. When you work with Espressly, there's no setup or development fees. You get a drive-through payment scanner, receipt and label printing capabilities. All of the data is stored in the app and it integrates with some of the world's best payment processing systems, including Square. So I hope that you would check them out if you are thinking about mobile ordering for your cafe to have them get started on your app today. Go to their website and reach out, espressly.co. That's espressly.co. Okay, everybody. Well, today I am wanting to talk to you about meetings. It's funny to meet you here on the podcast. Sorry, it's meeting humor, but I poured myself a fresh cup of decaf and I'm raring to go here to talk about what is really a hard thing for most cafes. It's either we're meeting too much or we're not meeting enough. And I find that you can have cultural decomposition, if you will, or toxic cultures or lackluster cultures as a result of either end of things. Either you're just meeting way too much and not a lot is getting accomplished. It's just everyone feels resentful that they have to meet so often, or you're not meeting nearly enough. And when I mean not nearly enough, I'm talking about, I think every quarter we meet up and we just check in and see how things are going. Really not enough to do. Some people are worse. They can't remember the last time they had a meeting because they think, well, I see them every day. And that's kind of like when I talk with partners that run a coffee bar, whether it's like a husband and wife or, a family or just business partners, what's happening is they are considering every waking moment fair game for communication. But meetings make things more official and they're more focused. And if done right, they can accomplish a lot more. And what we really want from meetings is communication, but not just communication, because communication is a means. It's a means to accomplish something. Clarity, having people not only be informed, but given tools for success, that understanding and that, transference of tools and information, that has to be effective. And that needs to have an effective meeting in order to do that. And so I want to talk about how we can better arrange our meetings in coffee bars. Specifically, I want to talk about meeting mistakes that we make that will kind of lead to a meeting being less than it can be. So first I want to talk about, the frequency of your meetings. Now, that I'm an advocate for one-on-ones. I love the idea. Every time I have prescribed this as a tool for relationship building and trust building in your coffee bar, I have seen the fruit of this either weekly or bi-weekly 20 to 30 minute sit down conversations with the people you lead, and no negotiation there. It is just the way it is for forever and ever. It is a trusted place for conversation that is mutually beneficial. It is just something you need to be doing. Now, that is an example of a kind of meeting that just needs to be a part of your business. Now, specifically in this episode, I want to address the idea of meetings as a group, like you and your team meet. And what I would say is you would need to meet monthly as a team. And if you have multiple cafes, then each cafe would meet as a team monthly. And it does not have to be over an hour. What we like to do is to say, well, if we're going to meet, it's going to turn into this big, like, 2-hour session or 3-hour session. And that's the first mistake, beyond just not having meetings and assuming that communication takes place when we're just near each other, which, again, meetings can facilitate more clarity. When it comes to the monthly meeting, we can often let it go too long. I think we need to respect people's time. And a well-planned meeting doesn't need to be much longer than 1 hour to truly communicate. Now, it can go longer in some cases, but we really should be striving for efficiency and letting people know that we're honoring their time. So one of the things I see happening with meetings is that there's no set agenda. That's a really big mistake, because then everybody feels the need to speak about their pet peeve. That's how meetings end up going off the rails, is there's no agenda. And one of the things we can do to address that is to create an agenda for the meeting based on what we know the coffee shop needs ahead of time, and invite people to submit their questions and concerns via email for the meeting in advance. So 2 or 3 weeks before you have your end of the month, usually is what I like. End of the month, we're going to review what happened. Then we're going to talk about what we need to do and how we can prepare for this coming month. That's a good rhythm, in my opinion. But these emails that people will send you, sometimes those are great because people will have ideas that can be addressed in the group during the meeting. They're not just concerns that this individual has, but they apply to the larger business. And, I'm insinuating that other emails are actually going to be things that you can address with the individual, but we don't need to take everybody's time with it, because it might be just something that that person alone has an issue with, and it doesn't need to take everybody's time, which is typically what happens in a meeting if we don't draw a distinction between, is this a you and me conversation, or is this a all of us together because this is a bigger issue than just one person kind of issue. Another big meeting mistake that we can make is not paying people to be there. Mandatory staff meetings without pay is terrible, a terrible idea. You should not expect people to do work for free. And if they are in your presence, taken up with your business, that is paid time, and you should be paying people for that time. Let that be another incentive for you keeping things efficient, okay? Not that you should just rush through it necessarily because you want it to be effective. Now, you should already be preparing for how you're going to deliver your agenda items, and you should be keeping them pretty simple, because the only point of having this meeting is that you want to invite conversation. You want to invite people to ask questions. If you've sent the agenda ahead of time and you know what we're going to be talking about, people will have already formulated questions around these topics in their minds. This is a forum for them to be able to discuss, and you should be prepared for that. This is not you getting up in front of people and giving them a speech and saying good night. We could do that through an email. That's what email is for. That's what newsletters and Slack and whatever you use is for. Rather, this is a forum, again, of communication between people who are invested into the outcome of your business. Expect that people might challenge you on some things, and it's not even I don't even want to say challenging you. Expect that people would challenge the idea or the concept or the subject, because it's not about personal attacks here. That's something that could easily make its way into this meeting and can be mitigated through a professional and well curated plan and an invitation ahead of time that this is a time for us to have a discussion around these things. And that doesn't take power away from you. This might be that you are planning on doing something, but in the midst of, the rollout of a new menu or something like that, you want to invite some input that will be considered as you do these things. So, agenda, yes, we need to have an agenda ahead of time. You need to involve people in also helping set the agenda through inviting their questions before the meeting happens, because there are some things that they will have concerns about that may not even be on your radar. And I've said this on the show before, your baristas and your manager, I mean, they're there day in and day out and they see different things. What's the advantage of having all these eyes and ears involved in your cafe if you're not going to track the data and get the data that they have about your business? So this can be a very valuable time if we treat it as such. Now, I mentioned this a little bit, but the big issue that we have with meetings also is that we do them too frequently. You can meet as a way to sort of rally, but often the things that will go the longest to help turn your culture, it's not a meeting. You look, I've never been to a meeting where, hey, we're not giving great service and y'all need to step it up because you're not passionate about coffee or the customer. And I just wanted to have this meeting. And we have this like evangelistic kind of meeting with people, but it's not ever turned the ship around. No meeting has ever done that. Okay, so that's not a reason to have a meeting. That's a reason to change the systems and the inputs. It's a reason to audit what you are doing. And we've talked about this in episodes like being a people first leader, keys to resourcing your team, top 10 ways to lose employees. If you want to listen to those 3 episodes, that's a great place to start if you want insight as to how to address culture. Meetings are not the way you do it. Okay. It may have some bearing on some things, but it's not some kind of a 180 experience. So I just wanted to mention that because I do see that as a motivation for a lot of owners is, the only time we're going to have a meeting is when I'm just so freaking fed up and I need to have a meeting, and everyone knows it. And you're going into it with this idea already in mind that, owner's frustrated, they're going to put on the professional happy face. So it's going to feel passive aggressive. And we're all just going to look at our watches and go later to get drinks together and talk about how crappy that meeting was. So don't make that what happens at your place. Having a consistent monthly meeting with your staff that is planned out well and is efficient and involves them and is actually open to feedback and discussion without having you dominate the airwaves for the entire hour. Once that starts to happen on a regular basis, people, they won't necessarily hate the meetings. That doesn't mean they're going to love them. No one's asking people to love meetings. But I do think that they contribute to a sense of togetherness, especially if you're reviewing things and bringing up affirmation, bringing up the positive, which is my last point here. And that is a big meeting mistake is to always focus on how we're failing, always about how we're lacking and what's bad and what needs to be addressed and that kind of thing. You need to draw attention to the positive, review the wins. What did we do well? What about that time that, that bus unloaded right out front of the cafe and we just handled it, There's a lot of things that if you look closely, and maybe you don't need to look closely, you can see that you can bring those up and you can affirm. That can happen while you're also going to talk about things that we need to work on, okay? Both can be true, but the big mistake is to not make it balanced, or at least not to be looking for the positive and affirmational in these meetings. Otherwise, yeah, people will dread these. They'll be like, hey, here's another chance for us to get crapped on by management that doesn't see our work, it doesn't see what we do day in and day out, and just takes for granted that this place runs, even though it's not perfect, you know? No one's saying it's perfect, but let's not pretend it's all bad by dint of just not, focusing on the positive at all. So these are just some thoughts about meetings, specifically about team meetings in the cafe. I hope you find them useful. Thanks everybody so much for taking the time to listen. If you have any questions, email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. And I will see you here next week on another edition of Shift Break, from Keys to the Shop.